So what is organic traffic and how can you use medical SEO for your practice?
When we look at driving people to a website, which is one of the goals that we create a website, we have to get traffic to it. One of the ways that you've probably heard is called organic traffic. And you need to create content to attract people to your site. So channels are just different ways people get to your site. Organic traffic is one of the channels. You've probably heard of paid traffic, that's paying people to get to your site. There's direct traffic, people type in your website. There's referral traffic, people come from other sources. So just to give you that context. Organic traffic, though, is one of the most cost-effective long-term ways that you can use to drive traffic to your site on an investment basis, so that you're not continually having to pay to the traffic store, pay Google, pay Facebook to drive traffic. You can actually get your money invested in creating really, really wonderful content that is highly value optimized, so that you're really giving things to people that they want at different stages of their buying process. So if you think about that, how do you do that? How do you actually produce valuable content? Because I can't count, I suppose, the number of times that I talk to clinics and they say, well, I'm doing SEO. And you ask them, what are you doing? Well, I'm just producing content. And they're a content producing factory and they have hundreds of blog posts. But when you look at those blog posts, those blogs are really, they are sort of old school in that they are keyword optimized. So they've kind of cherry picked keywords, which is a good start. You have to you do look at that as part of your process, but they're not interesting. They're not engaging. They're not entertaining. They're not really something that will turn somebody who's glancing at you into a stare. Turn somebody, if you use a dating analogy, turn somebody who's going to stick around and find out more about you. Because when they read that very, boring, unengaging piece of content, they're not going to think, yes, I should book a consultation. Yes, I should call this clinic, because that is the aim of this. The aim of this is to impart your personality, your brand, your USP into that content in a way that you're actually producing that response in somebody. So how do you do that? You, in a nutshell, you want to look at the different phases of a person's buying cycle and ask yourself some questions. What would I want to know? If I was, going to purchase laser eye surgery, what would I want to know? And better yet, ask your patients, what did you want to know? What are the questions? And we know that Google is basically a question asking device these days. So you can look exactly at the keywords that people are looking up, and you can divide them into categories of, what do I ask at the beginning of my journey? What is LASIK? That's a beginning of my journey question. Versus the middle of my journey. You already know what it is a little bit, and you're starting to investigate, more of, how does it work and what happens later, and you dig a little bit deeper. You're willing to spend more time, and then finally at the bottom of the funnel, you're looking at, okay, I'm almost ready. I might want to see a patient testimonial story. I might want to see my testimonials done up in an engaging fashion too, so that I can see what other people experienced when they had the procedure. So you want to really ask yourself, what do people want at which stage of their journey, and break it up into sort of the beginning, the middle, the end of their journey, so that you can produce content that is engaging and what we call exciting at each stage of the journey.
The way to look at organic traffic is that it's a result of an input that you put in. Input is the effort and the creativity and the understanding of who your customer is that creates the ability to generate good organic content. So this is a content marketing question, because content marketing is what you need to do in order to engage people after you've generated attention organically through search engines and people raising their hand and, by typing in a keyword search and saying, I'm interested in, for example, cataract surgery. Then they land on your website. If you don't engage them with some really good organic content, then it's going to be quite challenging to get them to the next stage in the journey, which is to either download a lead magnet or take a self-test, or potentially make a phone call, or even better, make an online booking and just schedule an appointment with you. So organic traffic needs to be content that does one of two things, and ideally both. It needs to inform people. It needs to be something that provides interesting information to questions that people are actually asking. So there's no point in generating lots of content that responds to questions that nobody's asking, because nobody's ever going to see that content, right? So you need to really think, what are my avatars? What are my ideal patients? What are they questioning? What do they want to know? Most people are now using Google as a question and answer device, almost the way you might use Alexa. Alexa, what temperature is it? Alexa, where can I get laser eye surgery? Think about it like that. That's what Google works like now. So people are typing in questions, and if you know what the questions they ask, and we do know what questions they ask because we do this all over the world, we're able to provide them with informative content that responds to those questions appropriately. The second thing that good organic traffic has to do is it needs to potentially entertain people. It needs to excite people. So information is one thing, but information alone can really be a little bit boring. So you need to present it in such a way that it's engaging, that it provides some level of entertainment possibly. So you want to think beyond just a written blog post. You want to think, how can I potentially create an interesting infographic? How can I create a video that will deliver my content in such a way that makes it interesting? How can I create images? How can I create GIFs? How can I create lots of different, even like potentially, I have no practices that have done comic strips and coloring books. How can I present my content in such a way that I can make it both informative and entertaining? And those are the two recipes, or the two ingredients, I should say, that generate really good organic traffic that drives customers to your website and engages them to stay there so that they can perform actions that you want. Many people are wondering, how does one go about measuring one's organic performance? And again, organic is the type of traffic that you might receive through efforts that most people refer to as SEO, search engine optimization. So how do you do this, right? So what do you measure? Well, one of the key things you got to know is what's going on your website, because there are technical barriers that stop robots, Google robots, from entering your website, crawling it, and determining whether or not it's worth sending visitors there, okay? So some of these technical barriers that I see most commonly on websites of customers before we work with them is their websites are way too slow, okay? So they have created websites that are bloated in images, bloated with video, and just are not designed for mobile. So that, because as you know, in the laser eye surgery space, most people are looking at websites on mobile devices. And so your websites have to be lightning fast in order for them to really engage people today in an environment where everything is attention quick. So that's one thing. The second thing is that they're not laid out properly in terms of a folder structure. They might not necessarily have on-page SEO factors like appropriate titles, appropriate heading tags, appropriate keyword density. Sometimes these keyword densities are way overstuffed. If you've gone to different SEO providers in the past who really had a focus on keywords mainly, which is kind of old school SEO from, I'd say, probably about 5 years ago. If you've had your website SEO'd in the last, previous to 5 years ago, then, or potentially even now, you might be suffering from keyword density overload. So I think the key thing to think about is what's the intent behind what people are looking at, because that is how you serve up good organic content. So what you're measuring here is how many views you get on a page, how much retention, in other words, how much time on the page. You can get this from Google Analytics. And you also want to be measuring as well, what happens, do people bounce off the page and go somewhere else because they didn't find what they were looking for, their intent was not served? Or did they move on to other places in your website and potentially, even better, perform an action that you wanted, okay? So those are the key ways to measure it. You can measure it with impressions, you can measure it with click-throughs, you can measure it with conversion rate, but really, really importantly, you also want to get to a point where you're identifying how many leads you're getting from your SEO efforts. So that's where a lot of agencies don't go. They don't go into leads, they don't even go into patients. By far, they don't go into patients. So what you need to do is you need to find an agency who really understands the whole funnel and can track people from organic awareness all the way through to becoming a patient and every step in between. Back when you were in school, you had a relatively easy way to ascertain where you stacked up against your peers and colleagues. However, now that you're in a practice setting, it's a little bit tougher to know where you stack up, not only against your ideal, but also against your peers and your colleagues. And that's why we created the Premium Practice Score. And if you'd like to take that test, if you'd like to see where you stand up against the best in the world, or perhaps the best for yourself, you're able now to take that and then see where you stack up.